All right. This is the part I have been really excited about because this is the part where you all get to meet some of my favorite people on the planet. These are some of the best Jesus followers I know. These are Fort McKinley folks. And what I have promised you all, and I'll remind our Fort McKinley family this, that I have promised them that we're going to just have an honest discussion. This is going to be a time where you can ask them questions. If you're wondering about something I've said or how something's been done, I want you to go right to the source, and these folks are the source. And so I want to encourage you. I've made them promise that they will all answer your question as honestly as they know how. That my feelings or good image isn't something they ought to worry about, but they should answer your questions the way with the most honesty they know how to muster. So I'm going to have them, each of these folks, introduce themselves to you, tell you a little bit about how and where they serve in the church. I'm gonna have them introduce themselves, and then I'm gonna offer, this will be your time to ask questions. We've got a couple of microphones in the room, so when you have a question, just raise your hand and we'll have a couple of these folks run a microphone to you. It's going to be a little interesting technically because we are running this 300 and something miles away, so there's a bit of a delay in the uptake and the intake of this thing. So be a little patient with us as we figure out some audio. But I think this will be a powerful opportunity for you to hear from some folks and get some questions answered. So, Fort McKinley, if you guys are all ready, will you all at one time just wave at these folks in Holston?
If you guys are all ready, will you all at one time just wave at these folks in Holston?
There they go. Now they got it. So you're getting the delay a little bit, right?
Now they got it. So you're getting the delay a little bit, right?
Does it sound like NASA? We're landing the space shuttle here.
Does it sound like NASA?
Yes.
We're landing the space shuttle here.
All right, here's what I'd like to do. I'd like to ask each of you all at Fort McKinley, I'd like to ask you all to introduce yourselves, share with this group. There's about 400 people here. There's pastors and leaders and people here who are leaders in their churches and in their communities. They can't see you, Holston, but you can see them. And so I wanted you to be able to take a look. Also want you to be able to ask your questions. So I'm going to ask each of you just to introduce yourselves, tell them who you are and what you do. So on your mark, get set, go.
I'm going to ask each of you just to introduce yourselves, tell them who you are and what you do. So on your mark, get set, go.
Well, hello down in Knoxville, Tennessee. My name is Marilyn Hess, and I've been a member of the Fort for 70 years, so I've seen a lot of things happen. All of the important events in my life have happened in this church. I can remember the church when we had a pasture next door, in the field next to the church, and we listened to the cows mooing on Sunday morning. And I saw it grow from that into a congregation of 600 people, and then I saw over the years it diminished to a group of 40 people that voted 3 years ago for the merger. This has been a fantastic experience for us, particularly for me. In these almost 4 years, we've seen some dramatic changes, some wonderful changes. We've met some wonderful people. And I serve in the church now, working in the breakfast ministry. I help with the ministry on Tuesday evening, serving of the dinner. I work in the New Path, which is the food pantry, and I also help in the children's ministry.
Thanks, Marilyn. We appreciate you. Who's next?
Thank you.
Good morning.
Thanks, Marilyn. We appreciate you. Who's next?
My name is Tina Payne, and my husband and I have been at the fort for about 3.5 years. I serve in the children's ministry. I'm a lay pastor. We're also networkers for a Followers Life class, and we're just busy everywhere. We started coming about 3.5 years ago. first came up to Ginghamsburg, visiting here for a while, and one day during the service we heard about Project Neighborhood, which was happening the next weekend. So my husband and I went down to Fort McKinley to participate in that. While we were there, someone said, hey, you should come for service on Sunday. And by the way, we serve breakfast from 8 to 10, and it's free. So we came for breakfast. We stayed for service, and we've been there ever since. We have been so blessed. I think when we started, there were maybe about 200 people attending services, and now we're up to about 4 something. It's just an awesome place to be. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Vanessa Furry, and I came to the church about 30 years ago with my husband, who grew up across the street from the church, and we raised our son in Fort McKinley, and it's just been a beautiful process watching the church grow and transform. As I look to my right, I see one of my heroes, Marilyn. I look behind me and I see another one, Don Larson. People who depended on their faith in God to carry them through changes, to truly embrace, it's not about me, it's about those who are lost. So that's the beauty of transformation, and we've seen it at our church. We see partnerships, we see possibility, we see beauty, we see hope. We're diverse, we're energetic, we're human, but we trust God. So that's how I feel about our church.
Good morning, Tennessee. My name is Paul Jones. I'm a lay pastor at Fort McKinley. I initially came to Ginghamsburg in 2005 and was inspired by Pastor Mike Slaughter's invitation to become an urban missionary. It seemed a God thing that I lived in the Dayton area near the Fort McKinley, and again, I'm inspired by Marilyn and Don because of their loyalty and devotion to Christ. I serve as a lay pastor. I serve as an usher. I work in children's ministry with the teen people. I've even served in a mega sports camp, which is something that God brought to me as a surprise. I serve at the breakfast, and wherever God calls me to serve, Project Neighborhood or whatever I'm needed. I found that God has given me such an amazing love that I have to give it away, and I have to return that back to the lost and the broken, just as I am or have been lost and broken.
Good morning. My name is Greg Smith. I work for the Ober Companies. We're a developer builder in Dayton, Ohio. We got involved in Fort McKinley through a relationship with County Corp, who's a nonprofit who serves the neighborhood. We were introduced to the members of Ginghamsburg who had started the merger with the local church there, and have been working with the neighborhood on an infill housing project and some redevelopment efforts in that area. It's been probably one of our best relationships with a nonprofit organization, faith-based redevelopment. I've been very appreciative to work with it.
Good morning. My name is Don Larson. I've been a member at Fort McKinley for over 50 years. I have probably served in about every capacity there has been in the old church, and I was on the transition team when we merged with Ginghamsburg back in 4 years ago. I currently am serving in the breakfast ministry. I also do the food inventory and trying to keep enough food to feed everyone on Sunday morning. We have a little group called the Festivities Group that we work around the church trying to do those little jobs that, you don't get many people to do and keep things up. And it's a never-ending battle, as all of you know, in having to do with churches. It's been a very interesting 4 years in this merger because we have had a lot of surprises. When we started out, if you'd have told me that in a year's time we'd have 200 or 300 people in a service, I'd have said, oh, you're kidding. But that's what's happened, and it continues to grow, and we're very thankful to God for all the help He's given us. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Adam Blake. I'm the Housing Development Manager for County Corp. County Corp is the nonprofit housing development corporation that is funded through Montgomery County, Ohio. We take federal, state, and local dollars and do affordable, safe housing projects within the county. The interesting thing to take away from my presence here is that Montgomery County would not be focused on redevelopment efforts in the Fort McKinley neighborhood if there wasn't the church providing social services in the neighborhood. Because of the hard, diligent, and focused work of the church in the neighborhood and the nonprofit that spun out of the church providing the social services, the county wouldn't be interested in investing in infill housing in the neighborhood. We work with the for-profit developer doing a tax credit project in the neighborhood that will involve the construction of 25 new homes, and we are also using another federal fund source to purchase and demolish housing that is blighting the neighborhood, and then we will be building new homes there as well. So again, the takeaway is, if it wasn't for the fact that the church wasn't investing in the neighborhood, the county wouldn't be interested.
Good morning. Keith Rim. I've lived across from the church for 34 years, and I'm also, for the last 12 years, I've been president of the neighborhood association. This is an aging community, and Fort McKinley and Gingsburg has been a shot in the arm to what we've been praying for. We finally have youth in the church that are willing to go out, clean up, help in the breakfast ministry, and other various things in the community. So this has really been the medicine we've been needed.
Well, thank you, Fort McKinley, for introducing yourselves. I want you to just know, I know none of you are really comfortable with all of this, and these are folks who do not love public speaking, but they have agreed to be here with you, Holston, to share their stories. Marilyn, I want you to know we're praying for Hugh. We talked about Hugh last night as one of our superheroes, and we're sad that he won't be able to be here today. Hugh's not feeling well, and so let him know we're praying for him. Will you do that, Marilyn?
Hugh's not feeling well, and so let him know we're praying for him. Will you do that, Marilyn?
I certainly will, Dave. Thank you so much.
All right. Well, here's what I want to do. If you have a question, we've got a couple of microphones in the room. Rusty and my wife Julie have some microphones. So if you've got a question you'd like to ask to somebody or everybody on this panel, I'd like just raise your hand. Who wants to be the brave one, the first one? I go all the way in the back. You win the prize for sitting in the back. Julie's going to come over and ask you a question. And what I'll do is when you ask the question, I'll repeat it back to our panel so they can hear it from me. Go ahead.
Repeat it back to our panel so they can hear it from me.
Okay. I'm Pat Paulus, pastor of Washington Pike United Methodist Church here in Knoxville. We thank you all for your willingness to come and to help us see your vision. I would like to ask about your recruiting process. Is it something that you do once a year like a church down in Montgomery, Alabama, Fraser Memorial? They have like a September through November process of recruiting. Do you recruit all year? What's the process that you use to recruit people into ministry?
Okay, Fort McKinley, I don't know if you heard that, but the question was, what is the process that we use for recruiting people into ministry? Is it just a once a year type of thing, or do we? How do we get people involved in serving at the church? Who'd like to? Tina, would you answer that one for us?
Who'd like to? Tina, would you answer that one for us?
One way that we invite people to become part of ministries is just by letting them know what events are coming up, where the service is needed, and what they can do to participate. Also, if anyone has a heart to serve anywhere, they are welcome to serve in any of the ministries that we have. And also, Pastor Dave always lets it be known that if there's a ministry that does not exist and you have a heart and a passion for that ministry and would like to start it, you are welcome to do so. So there is always plenty to do, and there are always plenty of people looking for service.
Are you noticing that that all of our folks are using the word servant? We don't use the word volunteer. We do that very intentionally. Volunteer is a language of the club, and volunteers serve when it's convenient or comfortable for them. Servants serve when the master calls. That's the reality. And so at Fort McKinley, we use that language intentionally, and we have worked hard to develop a DNA that everyone serves. And so our goal is that if you've been to Fort McKinley 6 weeks in a row and you have not found your place to serve, you're starting to get a little itchy and a little uncomfortable if you haven't connected and plugged in. So we've got to work really hard to build systems. So I guess the answer to your question is we do it all year round, 24/7. It is who we are. Rusty, somebody back there with a question.
Okay. Yes, my name is Will Wallace. I'm with the Mustard Tree Ministry. We do street ministry in Chattanooga, Tennessee. I just wondering, how do y'all come up with creative financing for y'all's breakfast ministry? Because that's one of the problems that we run into in Chattanooga.
That is a great question. And Don Larson, I'm going to ask you to talk about this a little bit. The question was, how do we finance breakfast? And what creative means do we use to pay for breakfast? Don, will you share a little bit with us about that one?
Don, will you share a little bit with us about that one?
That's a good question. How do we finance it? Well, it's purely a volunteer contribution. If we'd like everyone to contribute, but basically the church is funding a lot of the cost that goes on to the breakfast, and we suggest that we'd like a $2 donation. But so many of the people that come to eat there are people that are coming from off the streets, or they may be coming in a bus from downtown. You can sit there at 8 o'clock in the morning or 7:30 and look out the window, and there's a big transit bus that stops, and there'll be about 40 or 50 people get off and walk across the street. So that's basically the way we do it.
As far as funding breakfast goes, Don's absolutely right. We count on the donations of people, and that is part of what Rusty was talking about earlier in how we want to get away from doing 4 and 2 and working with and behind. And so we offer people a way to partner with us by making donations. We also offer people that if you don't have $2 today, that's all right. You can bring it back next week. Or you know what? You don't have to be a culinary expert in order to serve in our breakfast ministry. Just let one of our people with a name tag know, and we'll get you plugged right in. It costs us about $600 a week to run breakfast. Now understand, I'm serving about 400 people a great breakfast for a little under $600 a week. When we on a great week, we hope to get back half of that in donations. So we know we have to budget the other half as a lost leader in order to get people into the church. Who else has a question for one of my folks? Here's one right over here.
I'm Roy Jones with Washington Pike United Methodist. How did you initially establish credibility and communication in the neighborhood?
The question, Fort McKinley, is how do we initially establish credibility and communication in the neighborhood? And I guess, Keith, maybe this will be the best one for you to answer. You've lived right across the street from the church for a long time. And how did you begin to build trust with the church and begin to become a part of this community? What do we do to build relationships with you?
Of this community, what do we do to build relationships with you?
Well, when you started seeing a lot of activity at the church, it became a great anchor. And then people came to the breakfast ministry, and things seemed to stabilize.
Keith, I remember you getting involved early on in Project Neighborhood. And I remember you being a part of serving you, because I met you at the very first Neighborhood Watch meeting. How did you see us engaging the community rather than just inviting the community to us? How did you see us engaging the community out into the neighborhood?
How did you see us engaging the community out into the neighborhood?
Well, bringing servants. It's an aging community, and many of my people that attended the meetings were either 60, 70 years old and weren't able to go out and physically do the work. So you picked a few Saturdays a Saturday every month, and had quite a few servants that helped clean up and transform the neighborhood.
Dave?
Go ahead, Vanessa.
Dave, could I say something?
Go ahead, Vanessa.
Project Neighborhood happened after the dry hurricane. Remember that a few years ago? And there were trees and limbs and debris everywhere all over the city, all over this area. And slowly but surely, things were being cleaned up, except in Harrison Township. And we realized it may never get cleaned up. So that was the first time that we went out, and we had a friend with a big truck and a chipper, and we partnered with Harrison Township to dump it, and we just went out, and people came. People were asking church, join us. And people who lived in the neighborhood came out and said, well, who are you and why are you doing this? And so through a somewhat small disaster, we reached out and realized it was good to be a good neighbor, and it's a good way to share the love of Christ. So that's how it started.
I always tell people that one of the best things that ever happened to Fort McKinley was Hurricane Ike. That gave us such an opportunity to serve our community and to begin to rebuild that relationship like we were talking about the other night. So church, don't let any disaster go unqualified. Look for those opportunities. Sometimes disasters are your best opportunities to minister to your folks. Rusty, there's one back here.
Hello, I'm Carl from Chattanooga. What were the greatest obstacles to the merger?
What were the question here, and I'll let Don and Marilyn, I'll let you answer this question. The question was, what were the greatest obstacles to the merger between Fort McKinley and Ginghamsburg?
What were the greatest obstacles to the merger between Fort McKinley and Ginghamsburg?
Well, it was probably all of the changes that were being made. I think, is this what the person wanted to know? What changes were very hard for us to accept? Is that the question the person is asking?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. All right. Well, I think that when we first started, there was the physical change to the church. The altar and the lectern were taken down. The whole front of the church was opened up, and all of these things that we had cherished through the years were gone. We had a Don, what was that light called? The light.
Oh.
Yes.
Well,
we can't even remember it now. So, but anyway, and these things were, very precious to us, and those were all gone. I think probably the biggest thing that we had to accept was the music. the music was completely different from what we had known growing up in an United Brethren, then an Evangelical United Brethren, and then a United Methodist Church. Completely different music. And if you'd ask my husband about the music, he still is not cannot accept the music, but he's doing much better. But so that was a big change that we had to take. And then a lot of the traditions that we had in the church were no longer being used and so forth. So those were some of the main things that were difficult. One of the things that was very hard for some of our elderly members to accept was the removal of the American flag. We had one gentleman who had served in World War II and who always wore his Army uniform on Memorial Day, and he just could not accept that the American flag would not be in a sanctuary of a church. Let's see, I'll see if Don has anything else he wants to add.
Well, I think Maryland has hit a lot of the things that were different. The music obviously is a major difference from a lot of people. They like the old style hymns. We like to participate and sing with the old style hymns. I think that the service was starting initially was kind of following where we were going, but we eventually got into the service we have today, which is probably, if you went back 4 years, would be very different. We have basically the many people that were still attending at the time when we merged. A lot of those are still there. There are some people who aren't there. I don't think that, I think it takes getting used to the type of service we have today, because as people who have gone there 50 or 60 years, we're kind of set in our standards as to what we expect to see. But on the other hand, there's a lot of changes that are really positive. When we had our church, we had a very difficult time finding someone to teach Sunday school, and then we'd have 4 or 5 kids going to Sunday school. Now you're liable to get stampeded if you walk down that aisle in the Sunday school wing, and there's a lot of enthusiasm there, and there's youth activities going on, and there's just a number of things that are different, but they're all positive. So I think that it's been a good experience. You aren't going to satisfy everyone, but you have to kind of go with the crowd. So,
all right, who else? Julie, you've got one back here.
First of all, volunteer is probably not a term we're going to be able to get rid of here in East Tennessee.
If you didn't hear that, Fort McKinley, they said we're probably never going to be able to get rid of the word volunteer in Tennessee. So, excellent.
My question is, what part did the laity play in silencing the naysayers with all the changes in the ministries that were coming along?
Okay, this is a great question. The question was, what part did you all play in helping some of the folks who were silencing the naysayers was the exact word, helping some of the folks who were less comfortable with some of the changes? What role did you all play in helping people come around some of the changes that were being made?
Well, I can answer that. That's what I referred to when I said that Marilyn and Don and others like them were my heroes, because they really hurt during some of this. Now, ours was a merger, so it's like 2 families coming together, and you're going to have some bumps. And some things we might not have done well, some things we did. But it was just something you had to go through. And at one point, one of these guys was talking to me with tears in his eyes. And I know it hurt. But I said, it's like having a baby. You know, it's going to hurt for a while, but when we get there, we'll have birthed something beautiful, and we'll forget the pain. We'll forget the light, the ever-burning light. But it's hard. And I think you've got to look at where your change is coming from, which ultimately is from God. But if it's from within, you've got to get your people to embrace a vision. And once people have that vision and you focus and you pray and you trust, it will happen. And that's the hard thing. But it's not about us. It's like Hugh. Hugh always wore his sport coat to church, and he said, I don't think I can come to church without my coat on, you know. And I said, Huey, it's not about you, but if someone comes in off the street and their clothes are tattered and they look a little rough and they see your suit, they're not going to feel welcome. You know, we have to dress down to make people feel welcome. And then next week he had a T-shirt on, and a few weeks later he's got his ball cap on backwards. I mean, he embraced the change. And so, yeah, you just have to have that vision, have good leadership, have a plan, and focus, pray, and wait. But step out. If it's only in one area, come together and step out and realize that things do have to change. And what's more important, our tradition or, you know, growth.
And another thing, whenever I would talk to someone that was, as you call them, the naysayers, I would try to tell them about the wonderful people that we had met. And this to me is one of the outstanding things, the people that came from Ginghamsburg to help us in this transition, and the wonderful people that we've met, and the devotion these people had, and the giving spirit that these people had. I always try to tell these naysayers about the wonderful experiences and letting them know that, you know, think about the other side.
Amen. All right, Rusty's got another question. Let's grab some of these up front here in a minute. Go ahead, Rusty.
All right, Rusty's got another question.
Go ahead.
Hey, Dave, my question is, a couple of people, at least two, said that they're lay pastors. So what does that role entail, and are they servants or are they paid staff persons?
That is an excellent question, and I'll let I think three people on our panel today are lay pastors. Would somebody please tell these folks what a lay pastor is, what a lay pastor does, and how you become one?
What a lay pastor is, what a lay pastor does, and how you become one.
I'll take that, Dave. A lay pastor is an extension of the pastor. He prays for people. He does the hospital visits. Even at times of family loss, he will provide a funeral service. They spread the pastor out throughout the community and make Jesus available to each and every one that's in that church community. And they also are symbols of what that church is about in serving the people of God and serving the church.
We have our lay pastor program. Here's the reality, folks. Remember yesterday I said as leaders, sometimes we get so busy doing all the stuff of church, we never get to do the stuff that really matters. I know that as the only pastor at Fort McKinley, I can never provide for all of the needs of 450 people, and I can never hope to provide excellent pastoral care. So we have a 12-week training course that people can become a part of. This is after you become a member, after you've been serving in the church and you're looking for that next step in your faith journey. You can become a lay pastor by going through this course. There's an interview process. Not everyone makes it through the course. It's a high bar kind of deal. And our lay pastors do all of our pastoral care at Fort McKinley. They visit in nursing homes. They go to they do funerals, they visit in hospitals, they visit shut-ins, they pray for people who come to the altar, they serve in our prayer rooms. Our lay pastors do all of this stuff because I always tell my church, if I'm the last person you want to see if you're in the hospital. You probably know me well enough by now to know I'm kind of a type A, kind of suck it up, get over it, and get out and serve your community kind of, you're laid up in the hospital with a broken leg. I'm like, why aren't you serving Jesus? You don't want me visiting at your hospital. I don't have those gifts. But there are people in this church who have those gifts. And so it becomes my job to empower. Remember, we are about empowering and transforming. And so these folks, they do all of that pastoral care. Now, that's not an easy process because we had a church full of folks who expected the pastor to be there. So we had to make some of those changes, those DNA changes along the way. Later on this afternoon, I'll tell you a story about, somebody remind me to tell you a story about how I began to do that. But critical program, and if you're interested in that program, we can send you some information on that. Just email me and I can send you some information on that. All right, who else? Go ahead.
What was the financial state of the church whenever it was 40 people, and how did you get the money to start the new ministries?
Okay, Don Larson, this is a question for you. The question is, what was the financial state of the church when before the merger, and how did we get the money to make some of the changes and kind of restart this church? How did that all happen?
Well, Fort McKinley had probably $150,000 in securities or CDs. And so when we merged with Ginghamsburg, we transferred all of that money into Ginghamsburg into a special account, I think is the way they set it up. And they used that money to make the changes that were done into the Sunday school rooms, into the sanctuary. It was probably the funds that we did to start out some of the ministries that have gone on. And then there was, I believe, money from Ginghamsburg. I don't know how much that was put into it also. So that was kind of the way the funds were handled at the time of the merger.
Here's the great thing about what Don is saying. Every single capital investment that we've made since the merger has been paid for out of Fort McKinley's own money. So Fort McKinley had this money, and part of the discernment process as we decided whether we could merge with this church or not, part of that discernment process was, are we getting ourselves into a money pit? And one of the big attractive pieces was that Fort McKinley had, remember I said yesterday, about enough money in the bank to stay open for another year or so, and then they were going to have to really make some decisions. And so we have tried to honor Fort McKinley by using their own money to make some of the changes, some of the capital needs that the church had. So what Ginghamsburg provided was some stability in operating costs, so that we could come in and really make some of the structural changes we needed to make in order to be able to stand on our own. When I first got to Fort McKinley, the average offering was $1,700 a week, and the average weekly need was $3,500 a week. So you could see we're in a little trouble there. Today, the average weekly need is $6,500 a week to run the ministries at Fort McKinley, and that includes everything that happens. So if Ginghamsburg got hit by a tornado tomorrow, it would cost us $6,500 a week to change nothing. My salary, Rusty's salary, everything comes out of that number. Right now, we're averaging about $6,300 a week, so we are right there at that break-even place after three and a half years. All right, another question. Julie, you got somebody? She's coming to bring you a mic.
I think this question is actually for Keith. We have a neighborhood that is pretty much run by drug lords, and so the people in the community are they're not able to be a neighborhood watch. They're terrified. We would like to help that happen, but we don't really know how to start.
Okay, so this question is for Keith. Keith, there's a leader here who's in a neighborhood that she describes as run by drug lords, and so they've tried to do a neighborhood watch, but the people in the neighborhood are terrified. As somebody who's so committed to neighborhood and neighborhood watch, what advice would you give her about how the church can come alongside the neighbors?
What advice would you give her about how the church can come alongside the neighbors?
Offering them a place to meet with your sheriff or local law enforcement and give your ideas during that meeting.